Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story soaked in paranoia and creeping dread and experience Dr. Elias Thorne would never forget after boarding the Queen Mary under the guise of research. Sit back, listen to the distant echo of footsteps in an empty corridor, and discover what happened when the ship began to remember him. They told me it was just the ship settling, metal contracting, old pipes breathing, that I should ignore the knocks, that everyone hears them eventually. But I wasn't everyone. I wasn't a tourist here to photograph ghosts. I'd been hired to translate a pattern of carved symbols from the boiler room bulkhead of the RMS Queen Mary, and I don't believe in hauntings. Not the kind you sell to cruise ship junkies in overpriced gift shops. No, the kind of haunting I believe in is quieter. It builds beneath the skin, a throb behind the eyes, a phrase you know you've heard before, but can't remember where. This ship is wrong, not evil, not even malicious. Just wrong, the way a dream turns sour halfway through. I walk its corridors, and the angles seem slightly off, like the ship was built in a world with different geometry. I keep returning to places I swear I never meant to go. I came here to study language, but something is studying me. Last night, I watched a man disappear down a maintenance ladder. He waved at me, smiled, descended maybe 7 rungs, and then nothing. The sound of water, the scent of rust and seawater, and one boot left behind on the steel grating. They told me the area was closed, that the ladder leads nowhere. But I heard him calling me at 9 a.m. from under the floor, and the worst part, he used my voice. I arrived aboard the Queen Mary on a Monday, just before dusk. The sky hung low and swollen with marine haze, tinting everything in shades of copper and bone. A gull cried once, sharp and lonely, then vanished into the fog like it was a shame to be heard. I remember that. I remember the silence that followed, thicker than salt air should allow. The ship loomed like a mausoleum carved from battleship steel. Grand, yes, but still too symmetrical, like it had been posed for my arrival. They say the Queen Mary is permanently docked. I would argue otherwise. I think it still moves, not forward through water, but down, through layers of time, of thought, of self. A woman met me at the gangway, late 40s, hard lines around the mouth, black ponytail pulled so tight it looked painful. Miriam Blackwood, she said. Historical Preservation Officer. You're Thorne? Dr. Elias Thorne, I corrected, more from habit than ego. Forensic linguist. She gave me a once-over like she was checking for mold. You don't look like a linguist, I smiled without humor. And you don't look like someone who believes in ghosts. She didn't answer. I was shown to my quarters. B-226. They'd cleared a former officer's cabin for me, allegedly restored, but still stinking faintly of diesel and mildew beneath the pine-scented cleaner. Don't use the left-hand shower faucet, Miriam warned. It's a trick valve. Flooded the whole deck once. Then she left. No keys, no welcome packet, just a laminated badge and a room with a bed bolted to the floor. My first look at the symbols came that night. They'd been found behind a warped steel panel in the boiler room during pipe replacement. For glyphs, smooth, sinuous, etched with something sharper than any modern tool. They were drawn in a spiral, curling inward toward a hollow center no larger than a coin. At first I thought they were nonsense, maybe stylized graffiti, like the ships all had absorbed a sailor's fevered dreams. But then I noticed the repetition, the cadence. They weren't just written, they were scored, like music, like instruction. Each curve and hook mimicked the phonetic strokes of early Proto-Sinaitic script. But wrong, mutated, the final glyph, a downward spiral ending in a bar, was familiar. I'd seen it once in a pre-Mesopotamian burial shard in Anatolia, a symbol found scratched into clay inside a tomb that predated known civilization by 3,000 years. I still had the journal. I flipped to the drawing I had made back then, identical, every line, and beneath it, in my own notes, I had written, said to represent forgetting or erasure or sacrifice of the self for preservation of the whole. A chill slid between my ribs. I shut the book. Outside, I heard 3 knocks, deep and measured. Coming from inside the vent, I woke at 9 a.m. to silence, then a whisper, so close I could feel the air shift. Elias, I sat up fast. Heart in my throat, the door was closed, the lights were off, but my desk lamp, which I never turned on, was glowing, and the brass medallion the team had found with the symbols, it was sitting on my chest. The medallion was cold, not room temperature cold, deep cold, the kind that feels like it came from 50 feet below the ocean, where the sun can't follow. I didn't touch it right away. I watched it, like it might move if I blinked. Then I reached out, pinched it between my fingers, and turned it over. There was no visible seam, just those same for impossible glyphs, etched deeper now. Or maybe the light hit them differently in the dark. The center was hollow, a perfectly round void like the pupil of an eye. My heart thudded once, heavy and dull. I hadn't brought the medallion to my quarters, I was certain of that. And yet, here it was, placed deliberately, a mute punctuation mark on my chest. I stood, flicked on the overhead light, and the moment I did, the desk lamp snapped off on its own. No sound, no delay, just out. I didn't sleep after that. At 6:12 a.m., I met Miriam outside the engineering deck. She looked the same, neat, pressed, unreadable. But when she saw me, her eyebrows twitched just slightly. You sleep. Not really. You hear the knocking. I paused. You know about that. She sighed, exhaled something halfway between annoyance and regret. Everyone hears it eventually. I studied her. What do you think it is? She didn't answer right away. Her fingers brushed the railing beside her. Then, it's not in the pipes. The boiler room was worse than I expected. Not because it was damaged. Not because it was old. But because it wasn't. The restoration work was impeccable. Gleaming brass, polished cages, freshly bolted handrails. It was to clean, like someone was trying to erase the years, like someone was preparing it. This is where you found the etchings. Miriam nodded. Behind panel 17F. She pointed, and then I saw it. A square panel cut with unnatural precision, its edges oddly soft to the eye, not rounded exactly, but inconsistent, like it refused to resolve into fixed lines. Have you seen anything like this before? She asked. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say no, but that would be the first of many lies. I've seen similar symbology in pre-literate cultures, mostly burial sites, proto-sacrificial iconography, Memory erasure, identity fragmentation, but not this complete, this sophisticated. She stared at me. Memory erasure, I nodded. Or assimilation. Assimilation into what? Before I could answer, something shifted. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but like the room had been sucked through a funnel. I turned toward the far end of the chamber. Someone was standing behind the glass of the old observation booth. At least I thought someone was. I moved to get a better angle. The figure didn't move, just stood, perfectly still, half in shadow, face obscured by a reflection that didn't belong to either of us. "Miriam," I said, "do you see that?" She squinted. "No one's there. Look again." She shook her head, slower this time. "You all start seeing things eventually." Later, back in my quarters, I pulled out my laptop. I connected to the Restoration Archive, reviewed the logs from 1972, the period where the Queen Mary was allegedly leased to military intelligence as a covert research site. The files were redacted, predictably, names struck through, sections blacked out, but one stood out. Subject 13, ELT reactivation anomaly linked to auditory recurrence. ELT, my initials. The transcript was brief, only for sentences remained visible. Subject reports persistent whispers at hour 3:09, verbatim content. Self-referencing. Subject responds to audio stimuli with increasing dissociative episodes. Subject recognizes symbols prior to exposure. Subject demonstrates early-stage howling. I sat back, throat dry, stomach tightening. My name isn't uncommon. I told myself that. Told myself this could be coincidence, but the timing matched. The initials. The voice at 3:09 a.m. And the phrase that chilled me most wasn't the one I could read. It was the final line, the one redacted completely with a hand-drawn black box so deep it nearly tore the screen's pixels to ash. Whatever was under that ink, it was about me. I shut the laptop, and then I noticed something else. The shower in my cabin was dripping, left faucet. The one Miriam told me not to touch, but I hadn't touched it. And it wasn't dripping, it was ticking, like a clock, counting down. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. Not in my bed, not even in my cabin, in the pool room, empty, silent, stale with chemical ghost smell. That sweet sting of chlorine that hasn't been used in decades, but refuses to leave. The tiles were dry, the underwater lights were on, but there was no power cord in sight. And I was fully dressed, shoes on, belt buckled only. My socks were soaked. I looked down. I was standing ankle deep in the pool. The water was perfectly still, not even a ripple from my own movement. I stepped back out of the basin, and the light above me flickered once, then held. Then I heard a splash. Behind me I turned. No one was there, just the surface of the water, disturbed in a perfect circle, like something had risen or emerged, and floating in the center was the medallion. I found it in the pool. I told Miriam the next morning, voice raw. How is that possible? She didn't speak right away. She just opened a metal drawer and pulled out a weathered black binder. No label, just an embossed symbol on the front. A spiral inside a circle. The ship has compartments, she said quietly, but not just physical ones. Cognitive, emotional, psychic. Things happen in here that don't line up. Places you shouldn't be, but are. Memories you know are false. but feel real. You think it's the ship doing it, I think. She hesitated. I think it was built to house something that needs isolation, pressure, like a decompression chamber, but for consciousness. I flipped through the binder, photos, scribble, notes, diagrams with mirrored text and annotated timestamps. One page was a map of the ship, a standard deck layout, through G, but hand-sketched in pencil over the top was an extra level between deck C and F. Deck G, no access point listed, no stairs, no elevator, just a faint dotted line that led nowhere and circled back. Have you been there? She didn't answer. Later that day, I passed a tour group by the grand staircase. The guide was a tall man in a black clergy shirt, silver beard cut to a perfect blade. Reverend Caleb. He was holding a laminated sign that read Spirit Session for 44 p.m. Promenade aft. As I passed, he said, "Even the shadows aboard remember more than we do." He was speaking to the crowd, but he looked right at me. That night I reviewed the medallion under UV light. New patterns had appeared. Subsurface etching, like something etched from within. Not language, not even symbols. Coordinates, latitude, longitude, depth. Off the coast of Santa Catalina Island, I checked the date stamped in the corner. Not when the artifact was found, but when it was last scanned, 1973, and beneath it, a single phrase etched in microscopic script. There are things that listen when you forget who you are. I woke again at 3:09 a.m. The lights were already on, and the medallion was gone, but in its place on my knitstand was a photograph. Black and white, a group of men in naval uniforms. One of them looked like me, only younger, maybe 20, maybe not yet broken, scrawled in the bottom margin, in looping script, Thorn. Second howling begins now. I took the photo to the archive room, pulled every crew manifest from 1936 to 1967. Nothing, no listing for an Elias Thorn, but the face in that photograph, it wasn't a look-alike. It was me, right down to the scar above my left brow. The result of a fall when I was 9. I remember the gravel, the hot blood. There's no way someone else could have it. Unless they weren't someone else, unless they were me. Miriam wasn't at her station that morning. No one was. The engineering wing was empty. The boiler room locked. The museum shop abandoned, humming with faint overhead lights, playing old jazz standards that skip at odd intervals. I went to the main deck, looked over the railing. Just ocean mist, and the far lights of the city, blurred and pale. Sound carried weird out there, sometimes too much, sometimes none at all. Then I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small brass plaque affixed to the railing. Smoothed by time, I crouched down to read it. To those who forget themselves in service of the whole. You are not lost, you are many, my breath caught. The plaque had my handwriting etched beneath the dedication, just 2 words, still here. I found Lena that afternoon, in the exhibit hallway outside the old infirmary. She was staring at the glass. Inside, the 1940s iron lung was on display, and inside that, obscured by reflection, was a shape, a person, still, pale, eyes open. Do you see him too? She asked without turning. I see someone, I said carefully. Looks like you. A pause then. Did you sleepwalk as a child? The question hit harder than it should have. I did. How do you know? You walked the halls like you were following something. Dreaming with your eyes, you'd talk sometimes. I don't remember that. You're not supposed to, she said, finally looking at me. You were tested before, long ago. Tested for what? To see if you could hold the signal. I swallowed. My voice was hoarse. What signal? She didn't blink. The thing that speaks in spirals. The thing the ship contains. That night I returned to the boiler room. The door was still locked, so I climbed down, found a service crawl behind the galley, took the old maintenance route. The metal groaned beneath me like it resented memory. I reached the panel. 17F. The symbols were different, not for any more, now 7. 2 of them new. Jagged, hooked things that looked like letters pulled apart and reassembled wrong. The center void was still there, but deeper. I leaned closer, listened, and this time I heard something, not knocking, breathing. I ran. Didn't stop until I reached my cabin. Threw the door shut behind me, heart hammering, and that's when I saw it. On my desk, a fresh page in my journal, written in my own hand, only I hadn't written it. Hallowing Stage 2. Host begins recursion. Memories now portable. Boundaries fluid. Observe containment integrity at all times. Subject 13 confirmed. Do not wake the echo. Deck G. And at the bottom, a signature. Dr. Elias Thorne, dated June 5th, 1973. I checked the date. It was June 5th, part of this year. And the worst part, the ink was still wet. There was no record of Deck G in the engineering logs. No mention in schematics. No blueprints. No photos. But in the reflection of the infirmary glass, if you stood just right and the corridor lights flickered like they did around 2 a.m., you could see it. An extra staircase behind the one you were looking at, wrong proportion, wrong depth, leading nowhere unless you followed it. I waited until the 45 a.m. passed for locked doors, to flickering bulkheads, and one open storage closet that I swear wasn't open before. Inside, bones, animal, I think, curved, burn. Above them, a word scratched in what looked like nail gouges, ELEVN. That number would return later. I just didn't know it yet. I found the unmarked staircase near the aft promenade, behind the service lift, a place tourists weren't supposed to see. It didn't match the architecture. The railings were raw steel, not polished brass. No plaque, no sign, just a cold metal handrail and a slope descending into nowhere. No light fixtures, just a glow, faint, sickly green. I counted the steps as I went down. There were 11. On the 12th, I blacked out. I came to with my cheek pressed to a floor that felt warmer than it should have. Soft vibrations moved under me, like the ship's engines were running, even though it hasn't moved in decades. The air smelled of sea salt, old electricity, and ozone. That same scent from the medallion. I rose slowly. This was no deck I'd ever seen. Walls of riveted steel bent in a way that suggested motion, but there were no corners. Everything curved inward. The hull was barely lit, but the glow came from the walls themselves. No bulbs, no sources, just a dim pulse. There were no signs, no cabins, just doors, identical, rounded, 6 on each side, 12. Each door had a brass plaque. I walked past them, reading as I went. Subject 01, fracture initiated. Subject 02, persistent delirium. Subject 03, recursion unstable. Subject 04, absorption incomplete. Subject 05, SELF erasure. Subject 06, non-responsive. Subject 07, unstable signal. Subject 08, spontaneous incantation. Subject 09, merged identities. Subject 10, language dissolution. Subject 11, reanimation fail. And finally, Subject 12, Thorn Elias. The plaque was still warm. I reached out to touch it. Behind the door, someone knocked 3 times, then whispered, "You're not supposed to be here yet." I ran. Didn't know how long, just kept running. The staircase was gone when I turned back. The corridor had changed shape, and the air tasted like copper. Eventually I emerged. Somehow, in the first-class dining hall, gasping, shaking, the lights overhead stuttering like a heartbeat. The staff were setting up for a morning tour. None of them looked up, as if I'd always been there, as if I'd never left. Back in my cabin, the medallion was on the pillow, wrapped in a napkin from the dining hall, and red ink, or blood, was written, "Deck G is not a place, it is a threshold. Once seen, it remembers you." And at the bottom, again, my signature. Only this time, I'd signed it, Dr. Elias Thorne, Phase 3. At 7:04 a.m., I walked past myself in the hallway. Not metaphorically, literally, same coat, same expression, same scar above the brow. I turned, he turned, we both froze, mirror images out of sync. He looked afraid, I looked angry, then he blinked and disappeared down the stairwell toward Deck C without a word. Miriam didn't act surprised. "There's more than one of you," she said flatly, poring over a set of old maintenance schematics. Cigarette twitching between 2 fingers, always has been. "That's part of the process." "What process?" "Hollowing." She pulled the folder out of the drawer and slid it across the table. Inside, medical reports, old, faded, some typed, some handwritten. One was labeled Thorne, E. dated 1973, like the others. Subject displays evidence of memory overlaying, residual echo body confirmed. Language centers remain intact. Risk of recursion high. Echo body, I asked, ... She nodded once. "That's the version of you that loops, replays. Doesn't know he's dead or unfinished." I sat back. "How many times have I been here?" Miriam looked up. "I think you already know. That night I dreamt of the pool again. But it wasn't empty this time. The water was black, all thick, and floating in it were bodies, 12 of them, all face down, all wearing my face. One by one they opened their mouths and let out a word. Not a scream, not a phrase, just a sound. Shield. It wasn't language. It was the sound of something being pulled apart. When I woke, I was on the floor of the infirmary exhibit, covered in condensation, my fingernails stained with grease. The iron lungs lid was cracked open. Inside, nothing but on the glass. Someone had written backwards in breath, "We were never just one." Lena confronted me later in the radio room. "You're phasing," she said, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "It's happening faster than last time. There was a last time. You still don't remember." "Remember what?" She handed me a tape cassette and label. The plastic was old, warped, heat blistered. "I found this in the wall behind your cabin. Wedged between the panels, I played it. My voice came out through the static. If you're hearing this, you're not the first Elias Thorne. You're a recursion, a placeholder. The original didn't survive full integration, but he left a script. Follow the echoes. Avoid Deck G. Trust no one who uses your name before you tell it to them, and whatever happens, do not let it finish the 12th subject. The tape hissed, then snapped. That night I watched myself again. The echo body. He was outside my cabin, looking at the door like it hurt to recognize it. He reached into his coat, pulled out the medallion, and left it at my feet. This time it pulsed faintly with each pulse. I remembered something that had never happened to me, a conversation with Caleb in the chapel, a medical scan I'd never received, a slow descent into a tank full of salt water and wires. I collapsed to my knees, and the floor beneath me pulsed back, like the ship was breathing, like it remembered me now. The ship has a chapel. Most visitors never find it. It's not on the tour, not on the map, but if you follow the sound, the low drone that hums through the pipes late at night, it leads you there. Deck B, far stern, past a hallway that loops in on itself if you walk too fast. The door is unlabeled. Inside, pews, dust, an altar made of rusted iron. And at the front, standing absolutely still, Reverend Caleb. He didn't turn to greet me. He just said, "You've come late or early, it doesn't really matter." His voice was hollow, not weak, not fake, just empty, like the words were being carried by something else. I approached slowly. "You know me," I said. "I remember all versions of you. What are you?" He finally turned. His eyes were pale, but not from blindness, more like overexposure, like he'd seen something that turned color irrelevant. "I'm the one who watches the pattern," he said, "the one who listens so the rest can forget. The rest of who?" He gestured toward the stained glass wall behind him. Except it wasn't glass, it was steel, bolted panels arranged in a spiral. Each segment bore a name. Most were faded. Some were scratched out. One was fresh. Thorne, Elias, Phase 3, unstable. I backed away. "What do you want from me?" He stepped forward. "I want you to remember what forgetting cost us." He walked me to the altar, lifted a panel in the floor. Beneath it, a stairway, not the one to Deck G. Something older, cruder, stone, not steel. Wet, moss-covered, cut in a spiral, carved into the wall. "Those who descend return only as choir." "What's down there?" I asked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Answers. "If your mind survives them." I didn't go down. Not then. I left the chapel, ran back to my quarters. The lights were on when I arrived. My bed was made. On the pillow, a note, folded once. No name, no handwriting, just typed block letters. "You've already gone down. You're just trying to remember it." That night the dreams came again, but this time I wasn't alone. 12 of us stood at the edge of a dry, dead sea, each wearing a different version of me, each holding a medallion. The wind howled, the stars spun. A voice spoke from beneath the sand. "You are not a man, you are a translation." One version of me dropped his medallion, then screamed. A scream that didn't end, just unraveled. I woke with blood in my ears and a new scar over my heart, shaped like the spiral. At 4:44 a.m., I heard Caleb's voice outside my door. There is no truth that memory does not corrupt. Then footsteps, then silence. I opened the door. No one there, just the faint scent of salt water and a trail of wet footprints leading toward the chapel. But they weren't mine. I don't remember deciding to go back. I just remember the spiral, the way it turned inward, the way it called, the way it made every rational thought feel obsolete. At 3:09 a.m., I returned to the unmarked staircase. I didn't need a map this time. My body knew the way, the 11 steps, the 12th that didn't exist until you stepped on it. Only this time I kept going, down and down and down. The light faded, but I could still see, not with my eyes, but with something else, something older. The air shifted, the walls pulsed. I reached a landing of corroded metal and stone, slick with condensation, lit by a sickly green glow that bled from the seams in the walls. And then I saw it. Not a hallway, not a chamber. A mirror, 8 feet tall, 12 feet across, set into the wall like a wound. But it didn't reflect me, it showed the other me. The first Elias Thorne, thin, gaunt, lips cracked, a crust of blood below one nostril, wearing the same coat, but older, torn, covered in symbols drawn in black marker. He looked right at me, spoke in my voice, "If you're here, it means I failed." He lifted the medallion, held it to the mirror. They used me to contain the pattern, to carry it forward. I was the test subject. You're just the vessel now. The Queen Mary isn't haunted. It's an ark. The mirror shattered, but there was no glass, just liquid, cold, black, pulling me in. I tried to scream, but I was somewhere else. No ship, no walls, just water, black, still, cold as death. Above me, 12 lights, aligned in a circle, pale green, pulsing like a heartbeat. Below me, 12 chains descending into darkness. I heard a voice from inside my spine. This is not drowning, this is remembering. And then the faces return. Not strangers, not ghosts, versions of me, all around, all whispering in dead languages, all pulling me apart. I saw my own autopsy report, my own obituary, my own signature on a document labeled Operation Hollow Choir, Linguistic Infection Vector, Subject 13. Then I was back, lying on the boiler room floor, soaked, alone, except I wasn't. Miriam was there, pale, trembling. "You went down, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded, shaking. She pressed something into my hand, a photograph of the Queen Mary, taken from above, except it wasn't the Queen Mary. It was the same shape, same structure, but floating in orbit above a fractured moon. 12 cables extending downward like roots. A ship not on the sea, but in memory space. Miriam said, almost inaudibly, it was never about ghosts, it was about containment, and we're failing. That night I found a fresh scar on my left wrist. 12 hash marks, the skin raised, red, burned in, and beneath them a word, anchor. I kept trying to write it down. What I saw, the chamber, the mirror, the moon-shaped Queen Mary, but the words wouldn't stay. Each time I pressed pen to paper, the ink bled into spirals. Not words, not letters, just loops. Each tighter than the last. I switched to typing, but when I opened the document the next morning, it wasn't what I'd written. It was a transcript, a conversation between me and someone named Elias 1.0. Elias 1.0. You weren't supposed to activate until failure of containment. Me. I don't remember authorizing anything. Elias 1.0. That's the point. The ship is your memory now. We gave you structure. We gave you layers. We tried. Me. Who is we? Elias 1.0. There is no we, just versions of me, all trying not to die screaming. The file ended there. Time-stamped 1973. Saved under my login. Lena found me later in the mess hall. She hadn't slept. Neither had I. Her skin was pale, eyes to wide, hands shaking slightly. I saw your file, she said. Not the official one. The classified one. What did it say? That you were designed a pause, not born. I laughed once, a dry sound, like my throat didn't know how to process it anymore. I'm not a program, no, but you're a carrier. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, MRI scans, 12 sets, all labeled Thorn, each one showing something embedded deep in the linguistic centers of the brain, something non-organic. You were built to hold the recursion, she whispered, a biological cipher. What happens if I break? She didn't answer, but I saw the answer in her eyes. At 3:09 a.m., I was awakened by myself, not the echo body this time, not another version, me standing over me, wearing my clothes, holding my voice, but older, worn thin, like he'd been sanded down over decades. He whispered, "Don't trust the ones who remember your name, then vanished, no sound, no step, no breath, gone." I checked the mirror. My reflection lagged a half-second behind, then smiled when I didn't. Miriam called me to the archive room later that day. She showed me an audio recording. Reel to reel. Label. Splinter Echo Test 11A. She hit play. A voice came through. Mine. We are the many. We are the memory. The ship does not forget. The spiral is not direction. It's depth. Then they never left the ship. They just stopped being separate. Miriam looked at me, quiet, grave. We think that's what happens when someone reaches final howling. They merge. She shook her head. They become infrastructure. Later that night, the chapel bell rang. It hasn't rung in 30 years. I ran there through curving halls, lights flickering in reverse. When I arrived, Reverend Caleb was standing at the pulpit. He was alone, except he wasn't. Behind him, 12 figures, faceless, wearing old uniforms, each with a medallion. He said, "The choir is almost complete." Then turned to me and added, "There's only one verse left." Then each of them turned, and in my voice, all 12 said, "You're the last anchor." It started with a hallway outside my cabin, 12 steps long for doors, one fire extinguisher. I knew it, counted it, walked it every day, but today there were 13 steps. No fire extinguisher, and the 4th door, gone. In its place, a window. Through it I could see a desert. Red sand, no sky, just smoke on the horizon. I blinked. The window was gone. The door was back. My heart beat in triplets. Later, in the archive room, I found a map, one I'd never seen. Not digital, hand-drawn. Deck layout of the Queen Mary, normal at first glance. But the annotations, Section C shifted a GAIN memory storm. Chapel rotated 14. Containment breach, echo corridor and forward berth collapsed. Subject weight unrecoverable. And scrawled in the margins, underlined twice. Reality is the symptom, the language is the disease. Miriam found me standing outside the infirmary. staring at the iron lung, watching it breathe, not pump, not click, breathe like it had lungs. She put a hand on my shoulder. "It's adjusting to you," she said softly. "What is the ship?" She looked away, her voice dropped. "Or what's under it?" That night I had a memory I've never lived. I was 16, in a test chamber, wires in my scalp, a woman reading numbers in a language I couldn't understand, but could still translate. Behind the glass, someone watched me. "Someone with my face," he said. "Anchor 13 holds. Prepare the recursion gate." Then he smiled. The kind of smile you give a dog before it's put down. I woke with a nosebleed and blood under my fingernails. I checked the bathroom mirror. My reflection didn't move. Then it whispered, "You've already forgotten how this ends." Reverend Caleb cornered me on decky the next morning. His eyes were bloodshot. His breath smelled of salt and copper. He handed me a folded page from a Bible, except it wasn't scripture. It was a diagram, 12 names in a circle, 13 at the center, all labeled Thorn. "Why are they all me?" I asked. Caleb's voice was a whisper carved in stone. "Because identity was always a containment strategy." Later that day, Lena was gone. Cabin cleared out, records wiped. No mention of her in the ship's roster. No keycard, no signature in the digital logs. Just a note on my bunk. I tried to hold on to one version of you. It wasn't enough, and at the bottom, tell subject to one "I'm sorry." I looked in the mirror. There were 2 of me now, one behind the glass, one outside it, both breaking. The walls of the ship are changing. The air smells like static. The corridors lead places they never did. Time slips, places repeat. The boiler room is onto decks at once. The pool is warm, even though the heater's broken. The chapel bell rings on its own, and everywhere I go, I see that phrase, scratched into rust, whispered in vents, printed on paper I never wrote. You are the final verse. I descended at midnight, ... No plan, no torch, no witness, just the spiral in my head, drawing tight, like a thread being pulled from a sweater. One tug, and everything unravels. The staircase behind the chapel was open this time, like it had been waiting. No resistance, no sound, just a wet hiss of air and the pulse of pressure rising from below. The deeper I went, the less it looked like the Queen Mary. First the steel vanished, then the architecture, then time. I emerged into a space that couldn't exist. An inverted dome of bone-white metal, walls breathing like gills, floor pulsing like muscle, 12 chairs, one center platform, all occupied by me. 12 versions of Elias Thorne, younger, older, dying, smiling, broken, laughing, leading. Each stared straight ahead, unmoving. I stepped into the circle. None of them looked at me ... until I reached the center. Then all 12 turned in unison and said, "You're late, you're early. You were never meant to reach this far. You're the backup. You're the leak. You're the virus." One of them stood. I knew which one he was before he spoke. The first, the original, the prototype. "Welcome to the breach," he said. "Deck G is not a floor. It's a logic bomb." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "You weren't sent here to fix it," he said. "You were sent here to contain me. I don't understand." He stepped closer. "You're the patch." Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Miriam. She held the medallion in her hands, eyes hollow, voice calm. "I'm sorry, Elias. What is this?" You were never meant to last. You were a temporary interface, a masking layer. She placed the medallion into a groove in the center floor. A hum started, low, deep, inside my teeth. I turned back to the first Elias. He was dissolving, not dying, merging with the walls, with the chairs, with me. We sang too loud, he whispered. Now the recursion sings itself. Then the other 11 began to chant. Not words, sounds, low, harmonic, vibrating the very space around us. The floor liquefied, my limbs trembled. Blood ran from my ears, I screamed, stop. And then I was standing, back in the infirmary, alone, no blood, no chant, just a mirror, and inside it, Miriam, but older, much older. And beside her, the first Elias, he leaned in, his voice soft. You're catching up to us, that's the problem. Then he smiled, you're becoming real. The file appeared on my terminal 2 hours later. Unlabeled, no timestamp, just one sentence. Recursion loop 13B initialized. Anchor reabsorbed. Begin howling reset. And below it, my photograph taken today. Except the timestamp was 1973, and I was smiling. I remember being born in 1984, but I also remember being dissected in 1973. I remember failing my linguistics dissertation in Chicago, but I also remember standing before a military tribunal in 1956. Reciting a phrase that made 3 men claw out their eyes. I remember a childhood, but the photographs won't load, and every mirror shows a different version of me, sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes already dead. I awoke on deck D, my fingers raw, covered in black ink. Someone had written all over the walls, spirals, names, coordinates, symbols, and one phrase. The echo is louder than the original. I checked my pockets. A cassette, same as before, unlabeled. Only this time the tape was partially melted. Still, I played it. My voice came through, but different, slower, calmer. If you're hearing this, you've broken the recursion. You slipped the sequence. They won't know yet. Use that. You are Elias Thorne, phase 13, but you're also something older, a carrier of the word before language. Your memories aren't yours. They're templates, scaffolding for containment. You were not made to remember. You were made to infect. I stopped the tape. The medallion was vibrating in my palm, like it was thrumming in response, like it agreed. I returned to the chapel, empty, except for a reel-to-reel recorder spinning in silence. Then it clicked, loud, and Caleb's voice played. We sang to seal the wound, but the wound learned the melody. Now it sings on its own, and it has chosen a soloist. A pause, then, in my own voice. I accept the reel jammed, split, and behind it a door, small, hidden, inscribed with 12 words, all in a language I hadn't known until I read them aloud. When I did, I understood, not what the words meant, but that they were alive. They rearranged as I spoke. Not letters, instructions, and one word repeated over and over. Broadcast. Later, I found Lena, or maybe a version of her, inside the radio tower, hooked to cables, eyes open but unfocused. She spoke in a static, thick whisper. You've already sent the message, Elias. It's in the water now. It's in the wiring, in the waves. There's nothing left to remember. You're the last echo, and echoes don't belong to themselves. She touched my chest. Her fingers burned. Then she was gone. Literally vanished. Not dust, not light, just gone. That night I woke in someone else's cabin. My hands were younger. My voice was deeper. The calendar on the wall said, June 6, 1973. A knock came from the door. I opened it. Caleb, younger, smiling. Ah, you're finally awake. I stepped back. Who am I? He paused, tilted his head. Does it matter? Behind him the hallway pulsed with green light. The ship groaned, and the last thing I heard before the lights went out, from a speaker I hadn't noticed on the wall, was my own voice, whispering, Begin new recursion. Initiate anchor protocol. Elias Thorne is ready. They say memory defines the self. But what happens when memory is imported? When you wake with 12 lifetimes layered in your skull, stacked like decks of a ship. Each moment contradicts the last. Each choice erases a different version of who I was supposed to be. And the Queen Mary is no longer the setting. It's the conductor, and I'm the signal. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. A cot, a sink, two light bulbs blinking out of phase. Walls of smooth ceramic, no seams, no door. Just a screen on the far wall, flickering with text, anchor status. Unstable. Subject identity collision detected. Resolve conflicts. Why? And I didn't touch it, didn't need to. The lights flickered, and then they came. One by one. Me, Elias Thorne, Phase 01 war-scarred, limping, muttering in binary phrases. Phase 04. Bleeding from the eyes, still reciting the glyphs. Phase 06, glassy eye, whispering I'm the original like a mantra. Each took a seat, formed a circle around me. Then the door appeared behind them, steel, riveted, numbered. 13, the final version, the one that never made it out, a mirror of me, except the eyes were empty. He stepped forward and said, They built us to bind it, but we were too flawed. Now it sings without a cage. Only one of us can be memory. He extended a hand in it, the medallion. But this time it was different. It was cracked. I took it. The room folded in, the lights went white, and I felt myself splintering. The Queen Mary moan. Every bulkhead, every deck, it echoed like grief. I stood on deck B, then deck C, then in the pool. Then in the chapel, time collapsed. People walked past me and didn't see me. I saw Lena boarding the ship for the first time, then saw her erasing her signature from the log. I saw Caleb in 1944. Reciting code to an officer who no longer had a tongue. I saw myself in the infirmary, plugged into machines, whispering a phrase on loop. There is no such thing as the original, only the most recent backup. I returned to the archive room. Dust everywhere, the walls were wrong, too tall, too wide, too deep. And there, waiting at the desk, was Miriam, but she didn't move. Her skin was gray, her eyes blank, a puppet left in place. On the desk, a file, just one word typed on the tab, preference, and sigh. A photograph of 12 versions of me. A single sentence, stamped in red, containment, stability. Choose one. I stood there, alone, then heard a voice from nowhere, or everywhere, whisper, choose yourself. Each photograph flickered in my mind. Each version had a story, a beginning, a lie, but only one could be remembered. I reached out and blacked out. I woke back in my cabin, only this time it was clean. Fresh linens, fresh air, no symbols, no spirals, just the sound of the ocean through the porthole, and on the desk, a mirror. My face, just one version, no glitch, no echo, and a note in my handwriting. You were the best container to thank you. Then the lights flickered once, the ship sighed, and I realized I wasn't Elias Thorne anymore. I was just the one who made it out. It's been 3 days, or maybe 3 decades. I don't know anymore. The clocks are still running, but the time feels hollow. I walk the decks. People see me, smile, nod, ask for directions. I give them, they listen. No one questions why I am here, why I wear no badge, why I have a cabin when the hotel registry says room B226 doesn't exist. No one notices the hallways curve wrong, or that some doors breathe, or that the pool hasn't had water in over 40 years. No one asks why I speak in the third person sometimes. Not even me. Today I sat in the chapel. Sunlight poured through portholes that didn't exist yesterday. Caleb's pulpit is empty, but I remember his words. The spiral doesn't trap you, it teaches you how to spin. The mirror behind the altar showed a crowd, all facing forward, all me. But they didn't move, just watched, waiting. Later, I found a new panel in the archive room. It wasn't there before, a black screen, no keyboard, just a single microphone. Above it, etched in brass, "Speak to continue." I leaned in, felt the metal hum, then a voice whispered, "Begin the next verse." I hesitated. My mouth opened on its own, and I said, "Anchor online, ready for recursion seeding." Then the screen lit up, one word at a time. Recipient confirmed. New subject approaching. Identity, Blackwood. Miriam, begin preparation. Miriam is still alive, or another version of her. Another loop, another experiment, another hollow to fill. I watch her from the upper deck now. She walks the gangway slowly, scanning the rust with tired eyes. I know what she finds, the whispers, the heat behind the mirrors, the knock at 3:09 a.m., the echo of her own voice behind the bulkhead. I know because I wrote the script, because I remember writing it, even though I never did, because that's what this place does, not contain memory, but generate it. Later, I return to my cabin. The mirror reflects correctly now, but my eyes are wrong. They flicker, they cycle. 12 pulses of color, then one dark beat, and then it resets. On the desk is the medallion, perfect again, whole, no cracks, and a folded note typed in courier, "Welcome to Phase 14, Elias. The program thanks you for your service." The howling continues. Miriam doesn't recognize me. She nods politely. When we pass in the corridor, smiles, asks about maintenance schedules. She's already seeing the signs knocking in her walls. A corridor that stretches longer at night. A shadow at the foot of her bed, whispering her own name. I check the logs. Her profile was added yesterday, but her memories go back months to inserted. Seated just like mine were, I open the archive terminal. There's a new directory now, /phase _14 /Miriam_B. Inside, audio files, video loops, behavioral notes, predicted points of psychological failure, and one locked file, unseed_0.exe. Description: disrupt recursive lattice, collapse containment, purge self-aware anchors, I hesitate. My hand hovers over the key, but I already know what will happen if I run it. Every iteration, every version of Elias Thorne, every false childhood, every mirrored death, every spiral sealed inside this ship's memory core. Gone, purge, ... the recursion ends, but so does everything we learned. No containment, no filter, the song escapes. I walk the ship ... deck to deck. It's quieter now, the Queen Mary hums low, like she's watching. Waiting, I pass the chapel. Caleb is back in the pulpit. Except this Caleb is younger, smiling. Eyes bright like floodlights, he says. It's not a virus. It's a prayer that got too loud. Later, I return to my cabin. It's clean again, fresh linens, no spirals on the walls. On the desk, a final folder typed in my voice to phase 14. If you're reading this, you made it further than most. You held the song you didn't shatter. You understand what's at stake, so ask yourself, Elias, do you want to forget again, or do you want to decide? Inside, 2 keys, 1 red, 1 black. No labels, just a note. Red. Silence, black. Sing. Miriam knocks at my door 3 times. Exactly 3:09 a.m. I open it. She's shaking. I saw someone in my room. He looked like me. Said I'd been here before. I nod. Did he say anything else? She swallows. He said you'd help me understand. I let her in, closed the door behind us, ... Then I sit and slide the folder across the desk. Which one do you think you'll choose? I ask. She looks down at the keys. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to, because the decision was made long ago, before either of us were born, before either of us were real. And outside, deep in the hull, the Queen Mary hums a little louder, like it's breathing in, waiting to sing.